the police. This is the police. The scoops are on their way.
New York, 2022. The mindless activities of humanity have led to environmental pollution and global warming, complicating life for mankind. The polluted atmosphere has destroyed nearly all natural wildlife, leaving people to fend for themselves. Natural foods are scarce, and people survive on concentrates produced by the large corporation, Soylent. Their latest product, Soylent Green, is made from plankton and promises to feed everyone. However, it is currently produced in insufficient quantities. New York Police Detective Frank Thorne lives with his old friend, former police analyst Solomon Sol Roth, who has an excellent memory and serves as a kind of archive for Thorne. Moreover, he has preserved a police reference library to help his friend with investigations. This day begins with a conversation about a recent murder. Sol grumbles that Thorne expects too much from his notes. This isn't the Congressional Archive. Meanwhile, the power goes out. Sol reminisces about the old days when food was real and electricity worked without interruption. But people ruin nature and now everything is dying. The man sits on a bicycle which generates energy for the apartment, while Thorne heads to work, stepping over the bodies of homeless people sleeping right on the staircase of his building. The streets are clogged with old cars that, due to a lack of fuel, now serve as homes for the poor or as venues for criminal meetings. In one of these cars, a young man named Gilbert receives a metal meat hook and instructions for an upcoming job from a criminal world representative. Meanwhile, in the apartment of the wealthy William Simonson, his girlfriend Shirley plays on a machine gifted to her. She is very pleased with a successful move and thanks her master when the security guard Fielding arrives to remind the girl that it's time to go. The couple heads to a store where the vendor sells them expensive products and shows them an item completely unattainable for ordinary people, a beef tenderloin. At this time, Gilbert uses the hook to infiltrate the residential complex for the privileged and ascends the Simonsons' apartment. Seeing the young man, the wealthy man remains completely calm, making no attempt to flee or call for security. Gilbert apologizes and explains that those who sent him can no longer rely on Simonson's silence. The wealthy man agrees with all his arguments and calmly confirms that what Gilbert is about to do is necessary for God. The young man raises the metal hook and strikes Simonson on the head. Sometime later, Thorne arrives at the deceased's home to investigate the case. He questions the caretaker, who assures him that the cameras malfunctioned, and leads the detective to the apartment where Shirley meets him. Ignoring her, Thorne examines the body of the deceased. Searching the apartment for clues, Thorne finds and consumes whiskey, beef, and other foods unavailable to him. Fielding talks about the shopping trip, and the policeman enjoys washing his hands in clean, warm water. He then collects the found papers, some pleasant items like toiletries, and the food into a separate bag, taken from Simonson's bedroom. Meanwhile, Shirley is distraught, thinking that if she hadn't left, Simonson would still be alive. But Fielding refutes her certainty, saying that she likely would have died too. Later, Thorne interrogates the girl, examining her hands. He doesn't fully believe in her sincerity, but Shirley assures him that she wouldn't risk her job. The fact is, she belongs to this apartment, like furniture. Now she will wait for the new tenant if he wants to keep her. At this time, Thorne is informed about the arrival of the sanitation crew. He orders them to take Simonson to the dump, but the crew reports that the wealthy man will be sent to the incineration plant. Shirley is saddened by this outcome, as she still remembers her grandmother's proper funeral. Thorne takes the bag of items and leaves. He returns to the apartment, stepping over the bodies of the homeless, and hands Sol gifts he hasn't seen in a long time: clean paper, soap, and pencils. He also lays out a classified Soylent report related to oceanography found in the deceased's apartment. Sol is overjoyed to see vegetables and cries at the sight of meat. The next day, Thorne goes to work. His boss, Lieutenant Hatcher, is unhappy that the case is still unsolved, but the policeman is convinced that the murder was a contract killing. Nothing was stolen from the apartment, there was no security, and the killer used a meat hook instead of a weapon to simulate a simple robbery. Therefore, the first thing the detective decides to do is check the bodyguard, and after tracking the man, he finds his girlfriend, Marta's apartment. Thorne searches the place, notices a spoon on the table stained with strawberry jam, and concludes that this is too luxurious an item for the bodyguard's girlfriend. Returning home, he sits down for dinner, prepared by Sol from the products he brought the day before. The friends savor long-forgotten tastes, and then Sol gets to the report. Studying the books brought by Thorne, he learned about Simonson's biography and his longtime partner Santini, who now serves as the governor of New York. Together they created the Soylent project, which became very profitable for its developers. Thorne goes to the phone booth on the corner and reports to the lieutenant what he has learned, unaware that the person who gave Gilbert the meat hook is in his office. Meanwhile, a party is taking place in Simonson's apartment, organized by Shirley. Thorne arrives and demands answers to his questions. Shirley can't say anything specific, as Simonson didn't confide in her. However, she does know Santini. Simonson introduced her to him. In fact, Simonson had been acting strangely in recent months, worried and even visiting church. The couple retreats to the bedroom when the building manager bursts into the hall. He behaves very rudely with the girls, and Thorne declares that he asked them to gather to ask questions. The manager is forced to back off, but the upset girls leave. Shirley offers Thorne to stay the night, take a real bath, and enjoy breakfast. She doesn't like being alone and is happy with the man she likes, as the others don't ask her opinion. Thorne agrees to the invitation. The couple takes a shower together, enjoying amenities unavailable to ordinary mortals. Later, Thorne visits the church where the deceased wealthy man had gone. On the porch, he finds a dead woman with a child tied to her hand. Realizing that the mother can no longer care for her daughter, he takes the child and carries her into the church, but the building is crowded with people who have nowhere else to go. Finding the priest to whom Simonson confessed, Thorne tries to question him. However, exhausted by the huge, sick and hungry flock, the priest only remembers the fact of the wealthy man's confession, not its details. Yet, under pressure from the policeman, he admits that the truth is killing him. It's so monstrous. Thorne returns to the lieutenant, who informs him that the Simonson case is closed, as it's a simple robbery. He asks to rewrite the report, but Thorne refuses to do so, finding everything too suspicious. For refusing to obey, Hatcher assigns Thorne to patrol the streets. That same day, Governor Santini is informed about the persistent policeman who refuses to close the case. Learning about Thorne's visit to the priest, Santini orders his elimination. Fielding goes to confession. Meanwhile, Thorne is patrolling the street where the Soylent distribution center is located. A large crowd gathers, and soon the product runs out, causing discontent among the crowd. The police recognize the danger and try to quell the unrest. However, people start rioting. The killer sent after Thorne tries to get close to him as machines with scoops arrive to load people into the truck beds and take them for processing. The killer shoots but misses, killing a woman standing next to the policeman. The crowd goes wild. The killer tries to reach Thorne, injuring several rioters and wounding the policeman in the leg. Thorne tries to capture him, but seeing the weapon, pushes the guy. He flies straight under the scoop of a machine and dies, depriving the policeman of the opportunity to question him and learn the truth. Nevertheless, convinced of Fielding's involvement in the conspiracy against him, Thorne sets up an ambush in the bodyguard's girlfriend Marta's apartment. The men fight, during which Thorne accuses the bodyguard of killing his boss and implicating the corporation in the attack on the policeman. Finally, he warns the man to stop following him, otherwise it will end very badly. After this, Thorne goes to Shirley. At this time, Solomon brings the oceanographic report to a group of scientists who call themselves the Investigators Bureau. Shirley has just finished bandaging Thorne and offers to go somewhere, but he doesn't know where they could run. Everywhere it's the same: hunger and a dying earth. The girl is upset as the new tenant is arriving today, but the policeman is sure she will please him. Meanwhile, the scientists announce the results of their research to Saul, and it is truly horrifying. Simonson, being a member of the Soylent board, learned everything, and his psyche couldn't handle it. The corporation realized they couldn't rely on him. To prevent him from talking, they eliminated him. Now, before going to the Supreme Council, they need to gather evidence. Saul is so shocked by the discovery that he decides to go to the place where they will help him die. Meanwhile, a new owner moves into Simonson's apartment. He meets Shirley and finds her attractive. That evening, Saul goes to the place, notifying Thorne in a note. The policeman immediately rushes to his friend. Saul is just answering the manager's questions. His favorite color is orange, and his favorite music is classical. The man is escorted to a private room where two young people help the old man undress. He is laid on a couch, classical music begins to play, and scenes of nature that no longer exist. Vanished forests, extinct wild animals, lost rivers, and the beauty of the ocean appear on a huge screen. At this time, Thorne arrives at the house of the Lord, and they guide him to Saul's room, but the doors are already closed, and entering is impossible. The detective can only watch his friend's last moments through a viewing window. He watches the beautiful scenes with Saul, marveling at the lost beauty of nature. But Saul notices him and is happy to be able to say goodbye to his friend. Before dying, he tells him about his discovery and begs his friend to find the evidence and reveal the truth. After waiting for the end, Thorne follows the stretcher, carrying his friend's body. The man manages to sneak into the basement, where the bodies are loaded into large trucks, and he climbs onto one of them. Soon the truck arrives at the center for processing human bodies, and Thorne watches as the bags are unloaded and sent inside the factories. The man goes inside and soon finds a conveyor belt that lowers the bodies to a lower level. Thorne follows them, and after tracking the process, the man realizes that Soylent Green is made from processed human bodies. However, the guards spot him, and the policeman has to flee, killing several guards trying to detain him along the way. He soon reaches the city and tries to contact his precinct, but the line is busy. Then Thorne calls Shirley's apartment and asks the girl to stay with the new tenant and just live. Finally, Hatcher responds, annoyed by his subordinate's actions, but Thorne doesn't have time to say anything before he is attacked by the corporation's men, led by Fielding. The man fires back and runs to the church, though he is wounded. However, Fielding rushes after him. He searches for the policeman among the people filling the church, notices blood drops, and follows them, but Thorne attacks first. A fight ensues, people wake up and scream, but the policeman manages to kill his enemy with a knife picked up from the floor. At this moment, Hatcher arrives. Thorne tells him what he has learned and urges him to tell the Bureau members that the ocean is dying, and the plankton from which everyone thinks Soylent Green is made no longer exists. Soylent Green is made from people. So the corporation is intentionally breeding people like livestock. The lieutenant promises to take the necessary measures. Thorne is taken away by paramedics, but the man continues to shout that Soylent is made from people and asks the lieutenant to stop it. The final scenes replay the images shown to the dying Solomon Roth. The adaptation of Harry Harrison's novel turned out to be terrifyingly beautiful and compelling. The most frightening thing is that there is no resolution, nor can there be. Even if people learn the truth, what will change? And the focus of the plot on ordinary people conveys the fragility and insignificance of human lives, which remains unchanged throughout all times. Los Angeles, October 6th. For Mark Benford, the day begins as usual. After kissing his wife and young daughter Charlie goodbye, the FBI agent prepares for work and meets Nicole, the young nanny who looks after the girl. Olivia is also getting ready for her shift at the nearby clinic, but before leaving, she dials the number of her assistant, Bryce. However, at that moment, he arrives at the pier, intending to take his own life. At work, Mark and his partner Dimitri begin surveillance of a suspect. When the woman is joined by accomplices, the agents start a pursuit. The suspects notice the surveillance, leading to a high-speed chase. At the pier, Bryce prepares to pull the trigger, while the entire city remains unaware of what is about to happen. Mark takes a sharp turn, and something strange happens. His entire life flashes before his eyes. In this vision, the agent sees a board with clues and connections, and then he hides from bandits who have come after him. Coming to his senses, Mark realizes that he wasn't the only one who blacked out. Chaos ensues around him. Hundreds of cars have collided, and people are frantically trying to find help. The agents spot the suspect's car and head towards it. Only the woman remains alive, but she babbles something nonsensical about frightened horses. Mark leaves Dimitri by the car and rushes to his wife to check on her. As he runs through the streets, he realizes the situation is much more serious. The blackout affected the entire city and caused widespread destruction. Olivia informs her husband that hundreds of injured people are being brought to the hospital. She ends the call and attends to a patient, a boy involved in an accident. Amazingly, the teenager recognizes Olivia and calls her by name. At the bureau, the staff is urgently gathered, and Stan Wadek reports the first piece of information. People around the world lost consciousness. It is evident that millions of people died because of the blackout. But Mark is concerned about something else. He admits that he didn't just lose consciousness. During that time, it felt as though he was transported 6 months into the future, to April 29th, and he clearly saw what would happen to him on that day. His colleagues support him, and everyone shares their visions. Only Dimitri remains silent. During the blackout, he saw nothing. Mark and Dimitri organize a board to collect clues, and Benford recognizes it as the one from his vision. He mentions a name that stuck with him, D. Gibbons. According to him, this name is where the investigation should begin. Olivia hesitates, but eventually decides to tell her husband about her vision. She saw herself happy, but with another man. Mark convinces himself that it might just be an illusion, but his vision starts to come true that same evening. Charlie gives her father a bracelet that he saw on his wrist. Olivia has to take Charlie to the clinic so she won't be left alone. While she revives her daughter's favorite toy, Lloyd, the father of the injured boy. Dylan enters the room. The doctor is horrified to recognize Lloyd as the man from her vision, but he doesn't recognize her. In his memory, he didn't see his companion's face because he was always turned away. Meanwhile, the agents return to work, and unexpectedly, Dee Gibbons herself comes to the bureau. It turns out she is a religious woman who brings the agents cupcakes and doesn't understand what role she is supposed to play in the global blackout. The agents check Dee Gibbons and find out that on the day of the catastrophe, someone else with the same name used her credit card. Without delay, the agents fly to Utah, where they are met by Sheriff Keeban. During the conversation, the young woman mentions that she, like Dimitri, saw nothing during the blackout, and the guy hopes that it was just a peculiarity of some people. While the agents try to find Dee Gibbons, the bureau studies a strange video. A man who remained conscious was spotted at a baseball stadium. Mark notices an abandoned doll factory, and recalling an image from his vision suggests checking the building. The agents immediately realize that someone is inside the factory, but they fail to remain unnoticed. An alarm goes off, and hundreds of dolls begin to sing. Mark and Dimitri find the suspect, but they don't see his face. The psychopath utters a strange phrase and throws a lit lighter. Sheriff Keeban dies from shrapnel injuries. Dimitri understands that his fear is not unfounded. He didn't see his future because that day will not come for him. Checking Dee Gibbons' phone yields results. The unknown person called an unidentified guy from the stadium. Hawk tells Dimitri about her vision. The girl saw herself pregnant in an ultrasound room. Following her colleague's advice, she decides to post her vision on the website that the FBI created to collect memories. Noah decides to follow suit. He also posts his information on the Mosaic website, stating that he saw nothing. The guy's inquiry is answered that same evening. An unknown woman calls from a hidden number and says she saw an intelligence report. According to it, the agent will die on March 15th. A maximum security prison in Germany. One of the inmates, Rudolf Geyer, strolls through the yard chatting with a guard about the blackout. That same day, Mark receives a message from the old man. He knows what caused the blackout, but will only tell Agent Benford in person. Dimitri meets Zoe, his fiancée. The girl happily tells him that in her vision she saw their wedding in Hawaii, and the agent begins to hope that he can change his fate. Mark gets permission for a trip to Munich. He meets with the old man, but Geyer promises to reveal the truth only if he is deported to the US and all charges against him are dropped. Dimitri meets the customs officer from Geyer's vision, and he confirms the old man's memories. The old prisoner gets his way. He receives a pardon, but when it comes to his testimony, it turns out that he only knows about the dead crows and that it is somehow connected to the scriptures. Benford hopes that the old man's words will be of some use. He asks Hawk to check all cases of mass bird deaths. The agents manage to find out that a similar incident was recorded in Somalia many years ago. Mark asks to be sent to Somalia, but after the failure in Germany, the agent's request is denied. Then Benford asks Al to contact a former suspect in a hacking case to help him obtain the necessary information. Meanwhile, Dimitri returns to interrogate the girl they were tailing on the day of the blackout. The guy is sure she knows what happened, but she insists that the agents are looking in the wrong place and that Dimitri should hurry, as he has little time left. Despite Olivia's request to transfer Dylan, he is kept in the ward, but she doesn't even suspect that the boy's father, Lloyd, poses a threat not only to her family. Answering a phone call, Lloyd talks to his accomplice, the one who, together with him, caused the worldwide blackout. The agents are attacked. This prompts the CIA to get involved, and all agents are sent for a polygraph test to determine why someone is now trying to eliminate them. After the interrogation, the government convenes a meeting to decide whether to continue funding the Mosaic project. Stan understands that this is the only way to gather enough information, and they must defend their case. The Senate hearings begin at 10:30 p.m., and the floor is given to Agent Benford. Mark starts to falter in his testimony because he hesitates to tell the truth. In his vision, he was drunk. While Mark struggles, his colleagues find something interesting. In satellite images, they find strange towers in Somalia. Hawk immediately informs Mark of the discovery. After a private conversation with the president, Stan finds his subordinates and tells Mark that they have secured funding. Mark calls Janice to share the good news and to warn her that they will soon return from Washington, but at that moment, the agents are attacked for the second time. In the dining car, a passenger notices an attractive fellow traveler, and to get her attention, he starts talking about the blackout. While he tries to charm the beauty, hoping to lure her to his compartment, Janice Hawk is brought to the hospital in critical condition. Learning about the attack, Olivia tries to call her husband, but soon, he personally appears at the hospital with his colleagues. The agents visit the deceased attackers. Examining the bodies, Dimitri finds a mark on one of them, a blue hand. Mark saw the exact same symbol in his memories, and it was somehow connected to the worldwide blackout. Dr. Simon Campos, the charming guy from the train, gets what he wants, and the girl ends up in his bed. but soon she begins to regret it. The stranger tells her that in his vision, he takes someone's life and enjoys it. Lloyd arranges a party for his son and brings him a Halloween costume. But as soon as the man gets distracted, Dylan leaves. The boy gets on the first bus he finds and makes his way to the right address. Dylan enters the Benford house uninvited, calling it his home. Dimitri finds another blue hand, but this time on a road sign. Following the direction indicated, he sees another marker and continues on. The nanny calls Mark and tells him about the little guest. The man is shocked to learn that Charlie knows the boy well, even though she has never met him before. Lloyd arrives at the house and immediately recognizes it as the one from his vision. Mark also instantly understands who this man is, and when Olivia enters the room, everyone feels awkward. The agents arrive at an abandoned house, which is also marked with the blue hand. Breaking in, they find several bodies with their hands smeared in blue paint. Returning his son to the hospital, Lloyd decides to head home for some rest, but in the backseat of his car, an old acquaintance is waiting. Dr. Simon Campos, the pathologist, informs the agents that all the deceased found in the abandoned house had taken their own lives. Agent Fiona Banks arrives from London at the bureau. Her American colleagues brief her on the Blue Hand ghost community. It consists of those who did not see their future, including all the deceased discovered in the abandoned house. Dressed as ordinary guys, the agents head to the ghost club. But to enter, the guests must play Russian roulette. The agents watch in horror, but when the leader of the movement takes the stage, they reveal themselves and arrest him. During interrogation, Dimitri tries to find out who hired the Blue Hand members that attacked Hawk, but Sunderland refuses to answer any questions, fully aware of what lies ahead. In his vision, Agent Goff heard himself talking to a lawyer. Al confessed to the attorney that he was guilty of the death of a woman named Celia. Tormented by these memories, Goff leaves Dimitri a letter and heads to the roof. To change his fate and avoid being responsible for someone's death, he makes a fateful decision. In his final letter, Al gives hope to everyone who saw something terrible in their visions. He assures people that the future can be changed. Simon finds Lloyd at the hospital, and Lloyd tells his accomplice that he wants to make an official statement and reveal the truth to the world, that they were responsible for the global blackout. Meanwhile, Mark takes his wife to the coast for a romantic weekend, but their relaxation is interrupted by a phone call. Benford is informed that a criminal with star tattoos on his hand has been found, the one Mark saw in his vision. Simon proposes a poker game to his accomplice. If he wins, the secret remains a secret, and no one will know about the blackout. If Lloyd wins, the scientists will make an official statement. Simon is confident that luck will be on his side. Hawk is protecting a witness to a crime involving the criminal with the tattoo. At night, Janice requests help from Dimitri and Benford, and Mark recognizes the person from his vision. Not wanting to take any chances, Mark shoots, once again altering fate and killing the suspect. Lloyd bluffs and wins the game. He refuses the money and asks his accomplice to prepare for the announcement. Janice receives an enhanced image of the first suspect and now manages to see the ring on his hand. This could be the first significant lead. Benford tells his wife that he was able to change everything and eliminate the man with the star tattoos on his hand. But at the same time, somewhere, a new plan is being put into motion, involving another individual with the same tattoo. He delivers a suitcase with rings to an unknown old man. Experts manage to identify the alpha symbol on the ring that belonged to the original suspect. However, no one can yet determine its exact meaning. New information emerges. The NSA discovered that several months ago, a suspicious call was made to Dimitri's phone. Dimitri realizes which call is being referred to and demands that he be given the caller's information, the only way he can prevent his own death. Mark finds a message on his wife's phone about his vision. He tries to figure out which of his friends could have betrayed him, but both Aaron and Stan are outraged by Mark's suspicions and deny any involvement. The agents listen to a recording of the call Dimitri received. They managed to determine that the anonymous woman was in Hong Kong. Despite the boss's orders, Mark informs Dimitri that they are flying to Hong Kong. The agents arrive in Hong Kong, where a local colleague is already waiting for them. Stan is furious that his subordinates disobeyed his orders, but Mark risks his job to save his friend. Lloyd addresses the nation with an official statement. He admits that on the day of the catastrophe, they were conducting secret experiments and takes full responsibility. But listening to the scientist's speech, Mark suspects that the real cause may be hidden elsewhere. Stan demands that the scientist be brought to him for questioning. Hawk remembers that Lloyd's son is still in the hospital, and the boss sends her to speak with him. An unexpected event occurs. Simon Campos himself walks into Stan's office. The scientist insists that he disagrees with his colleague and believes that someone else caused the blackout. He agrees to help with the investigation if the agents grant him access to classified information. Hawk meets Lloyd at the hospital and offers him protection in exchange for information, but Lloyd refuses to cooperate and asks to be left alone. The agents try to locate the woman who called Dimitri. To do so, Mark has to break another rule. He threatens the cafe owner who attempted to withhold the necessary information. Stan shows Simon satellite images that revealed strange towers. The scientist admits that the towers are his invention, a laser designed to accelerate plasma formation. Simon can't understand how this is possible. The technology to create them is still in development. But even more surprising is this: he invented the laser in 1992, but the images were taken in 1991. The agents inform Simon about D. Gibbons, who probably created these lasers. The scientist promises to help find the person who stole his idea. Lloyd asks the chief physician to transfer Dylan to a safer clinic, but after the announcement, the scientist loses his credibility and the doctor refuses to help him. Then Olivia intervenes. She promises to do everything she can to ensure the boy's safety. Mark and Dimitri find the cafe where the woman who called is having lunch. She allows the agents to sit down, but admits that she regrets making the call, and that their visit might only make things worse. The woman claims that the shooter who will take Dimitri's life will be Benford. As proof, the stranger provides Mark's gun's serial number. Shocked by what he hears, Mark loses his temper and creates a scene. He takes the woman hostage and exits the restaurant. A local FBI agent arrives, and Mark is forced to back down. While Mark is in serious trouble in Hong Kong, Olivia is bonding with Lloyd. The scientist tells her about parallel universes in which they might have been together once. The agents are sent back to the States, and Mark is stripped of his badge. Meanwhile, D. Gibbons visits the Sears home. Dylan is being prepared for transfer. Lloyd and Olivia bid a warm farewell, but the doctor notices something amiss. The paramedics turn out to be imposters. They open fire on the security detail and, abandoning Dylan, take Lloyd away. Lloyd regains consciousness in a basement, handcuffed. Hawk is tasked with hiding Simon in a safe place where he can continue his work, but those who need him find the agents as soon as they settle into the safe apartment. Dimitri finds Janice unconscious. Meanwhile, Simon is taken to the basement to meet an old friend. The scientists try to understand who and why they were kidnapped, but the answer comes unexpectedly. The same old man who recently received the suitcase with rings arrives in the basement. The kidnapper introduces himself as Flosso. He makes it clear that he won't be gentle, and the hostages should answer his questions precisely. Mark is assigned sessions with a psychotherapist, who helps him recall details from his memories that were previously hidden. Benford remembers that on that night he was talking to Lloyd on the phone. Later, Mark reveals another memory to Aaron. In his conversation with Lloyd, he mentioned a second blackout. Lloyd remains silent, realizing that his revelations could lead to a catastrophe, but Flosso finds a way to make the scientist talk. He has Simon's finger cut off right before Lloyd's eyes. The agents discover where the captive scientists are being held. On the way to the basement, Dimitri calls Janice and asks her to join the operation. Unable to resist any longer, Lloyd tells everything that happened during the experiment, giving Flosso specific details. At that moment, the agents storm the location, but it turns out to be empty. The only thing awaiting the agents is a booby trap. Driving around the city, Mark recalls the map from his visions and realizes where to search for the captives. By this time, Lloyd and Simon are being prepared for execution. The agent crashes into an abandoned store and rescues the scientists. Simon is loaded into an ambulance, but inside, he is met by Flosso. The old man apologizes for the finger and explains that it was to divert suspicion from the boy and to ensure Simon has no desire to rebel. He reminds him that Simon was the initial suspect. Several months earlier, after his father's funeral, unknown individuals took the scientist to a baseball game and ordered him to wear the ring. Thanks to it, he remained conscious while everyone else blacked out. The operation was led by D. Gibbons. Janice informs Simon that he will be held in custody for some time. The young man stages a spectacle and manages to escape, but not for long. When he arrives in Canada, Hawk is already waiting for him with armed soldiers. Hawk agrees to stay in Canada so that Simon can visit his family. But once again, Simon outsmarts the agent and escapes, despite wearing a special bracelet. Simon heads to a boat owned by an old friend, confident that no one will find him there. However, Hawk beats him to the boat, arriving even before he does. The pair returns to Simon's house, pretending that nothing has happened. The family prepares for dinner, and their Uncle Teddy arrives. Simon opens the door for his relative and is greeted by Flosso. During dinner, a call comes in, and Simon's mother says it's Annabelle, his sister, who left home after the blackout. Flosso prevents Simon from answering the phone and shows him a video. His sister is being held hostage to ensure that Simon doesn't try to escape again. To further demonstrate the seriousness of his intentions, Flosso shows Simon a body in his trunk, the old man from the boat. Fed up with the blackmail, Simon decides to break free. He attacks Flosso and stops his heart. Mark brings Lloyd to his house and asks him to recall everything from his vision. Both men feel uneasy, but the agent knows that this is crucial for his investigation. Dimitri is confident that the Hong Kong woman's prophecy won't come true because he turned in Mark's gun for destruction, but attempts to change the future fail. The gun goes missing. The agents fly to Somalia to inspect the strange structures in person. Simon is part of the expedition, but he is denied a weapon. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Mark informs his boss that he has discovered D. Gibbons' real name, Dyson Frost, and that somehow he will be connected to Charlie. The team of agents comes under fire. Their guide tries to explain that they are on a humanitarian mission, but this doesn't stop the Somalis who kill the translator. The Somali leader realizes that he's being lied to. He has already seen foreigners arrive and set up the towers many years ago. He locks the visitors up and promises to kill them, one by one. The agents manage to disable the guards and take their weapons. They reach the helicopter, but it's already being looted by locals, forcing the agents to come up with a new plan. The team attacks their opponents but doesn't have time to escape. They are once again confronted by the leader. This time, everyone understands that there will be no chance to fight back. One of the guards, out of fear, reveals the truth about the visitors. Learning that they are FBI agents, the Somali demands a large ransom to help him take over the country. Janice manages to persuade the leader. She convinces him that their mission is not to start a war, but to prevent one. The Somali helps the group reach one of the towers. Simon examines the structure with surprise, noting that it was built exactly according to his design, but long before he developed it. Dimitri discovers a videotape that has been stored in the tower for 18 years. On the tape, the Somali recognizes his fellow tribesman, whom he believed died during the first blackout. The agents also identify the experiment's author. It was D. Gibbons. Exploring the tower's tunnels, the agents find a sealed room where villagers were imprisoned. Judging by the remains, the experiment's participants were killed. The Somali leader is enraged by what he sees and plans to take revenge on the Americans, but Vogel acts faster, leaving the Somali leader lying with his tribesmen. Dimitri reviews the tape again, and the next few seconds shock him. D. Gibbons from 1991 addresses him by name. The recording is sent to the department. Mark watches the message left by Gibbons many years ago. Following the criminal's clues, Benford deciphers the chess code and dials the phone number that Gibbons left specifically for the agents. Mark arrives at a chess club to meet someone who could help in the search for the scientist, but the only witness has been killed. Benford realizes that there is someone in the department leaking information. To find out who the traitor is, Agent Vogel gathers everyone in the conference room, and a special team searches the employees' offices. A bug is found on Mark's desk. Everyone with access to the office falls under suspicion, creating tension among the colleagues. The agents are most suspicious of Janice. Recently, she has taken many days off, which she struggles to explain, but she deflects suspicion by accusing Marcy, a colleague with family problems. Dimitri reviews the camera footage and notices a pattern. Marcy was signaling with a coffee cup. Mark looks up at the girl and she understands everything. A shootout ensues in the office. Marcy kills her colleagues and runs outside. Her accomplice arrives on a motorcycle to help her escape, but Janice manages to prevent the getaway. Benford receives a call from Dyson Frost. He offers the agent a personal meeting and promises to call back. Janice and Simon head to the underground parking garage where the girl suddenly stops. She tells the scientist that his signal has been received. Her boss is ready to talk to him. Simon realizes that Marcy was just a distraction. The real traitor has always been Hawk. The police inform the feds that a crime was committed the previous night using the stolen gun. Dimitri catches up with Marcy to find out to whom she passed the gun, but she only says that preventing Dimitri's death is impossible. The agents receive a signal that a criminal with Mark's gun is committing a crime in the city center. Dimitri steps forward, trying to distract the guy and persuade him to release the hostage. As soon as the assailant lowers his guard, Dimitri shoots. Despite the successful outcome, there is no relief. The gun in the attacker's possession has a different serial number. Agent Dimitri prepares for his wedding, trying not to think about the future. But while the bride and guests wait for him at the church, D. Gibbons attacks him at his home. Mark decides to inform his wife about his missing friend, and while she is on the phone, D. Gibbons sits down next to Charlie. The agents carefully interrogate Charlie, and the girl describes her conversation with the stranger. She also hands over a picture the old man left her. Mark and his colleagues prepare to visit the address that D. Gibbons provided with the picture. Meanwhile, Dmitri finds himself at the mercy of a gun, which the villain has attached to a special device. The mad scientist enthusiastically tells his hostage about his inventions and plans. He claims that Dmitri's death is his only chance to save his own life. Benford arrives at the designated location. Finally, a teenager approaches the agent and hands him a backpack with a phone. The agent follows all of the criminal's instructions without question to save his friend. He leaves his colleagues behind and, getting into the prepared car, successfully evades pursuit. D. Gibbons directs Mark along a highway through the countryside. Constantly checking his watch, the agent continues his journey through the mountains. Finally, he spots D. Gibbons. The old man raises his gun and orders the agent to handcuff himself. Mark distracts the old man and attacks him. He demands that Gibbons take him to Dmitri, but someone no longer wishes to keep the witness alive. The scientist is eliminated. As he dies, he doesn't have time to tell Mark where Dmitri is. The navigator leads Mark to the last known location of D. Gibbons. Benford bursts into the building and spots his friend. There are less than 2 minutes left before the automatic shot, and Mark tries to solve the scientist's puzzle to stop the mechanism. The timer reaches 0 and the gun fires, but by this time, Mark manages to lift the gun and Dmitri survives. As soon as Dmitri gets out of the chair, water washes away the scientist's map, destroying all the evidence and clues. Mark instructs his colleagues to figure out Frost's blueprints and determine how they are connected to the second blackout which the mad scientist mentioned. A strange man appears at Olivia's house. He babbles incoherently, claiming that the doctor's husband is Lloyd. Meanwhile, Janice delivers Frost's blueprints to a professor of archaeology, but the people for whom the double agent secretly works demand that she steal the originals and hand them over. Hawk is forced to take a risk. She steals the blueprints from the institute and sneaks into the office to retrieve the last copy from Mark's desk. Benford catches his colleague red-handed, but she manages to talk her way out by inventing a story about lost documents. Mark asks Hawk to come to the office to meet with the professor. The girl realizes that her deception has been uncovered, but Benford postpones the conversation and returns to his discussion with the scientist. According to the old man, the blueprints that D. Gibbons had were some kind of device for counting down dates. One of them is October 6th, the day of the blackout. Frost's words keep replaying in Mark's mind, and an idea strikes him. He breaks open the large chess piece hanging on the board. Inside, the agent finds a ring with an unknown symbol. Olivia meets Gabriel, the strange man, again. He keeps repeating random nonsensical words, but finally, the woman manages to discern the main point. The guy has been subjected to multiple blackouts, becoming a victim of Frost's experiments. Experts provide the scientists with the results of analyzing Frost's ring, and Simon makes an astonishing discovery. Inside the ring is a device that allowed its wearer to remain conscious during the blackout. Janice meets with her handlers. After failing the mission with the blueprints, she is given one last chance. This time, she must retrieve the ring from the vault and eliminate Benford. On a city bridge, Simon spots his sister. Annabelle delivers a message to her brother. They need him and the ring. Simon has only 12 hours, or else his sister will be killed. Dmitri arrives at a crime scene and learns that someone has been eliminating all those who managed to survive the predicted date of their death in the last 2 weeks. Simon memorizes the safe's code when Lloyd places the ring inside. As soon as the scientist is left alone, he decides to use this opportunity to save his sister. The agents identify the executioner who has been getting rid of all the survivors. It turns out to be Mr. Slingerland. The agents catch the psycho just as he tries to dispose of another victim, but despite all efforts to save her, an agent accidentally hits the girl. Mark discovers a minivan and Annabelle inside. He informs Simon, but it's already too late. The scientist escapes with the ring. The agents investigate Simon and his alibi for the day of the blackout. Using special software, they establish that he was indeed the prime suspect at the baseball stadium. Olivia brings Gabriel to Mark's office to help find clues. According to the madman, Benford's wall is full of errors, and he forces the agent to redo everything according to his notebook. During interrogation, Gabriel says that Frost wasn't the only leader. There was someone much more important, and he will repeat the blackout very soon. The deranged stranger shows a portrait of this person. It turns out to be the man Simon is currently talking to. Gabriel is set to be transferred to a safe house, and Janice informs her handlers about it. The minivan falls into an ambush, but instead of the strange madman, it's Mark disguised inside. But the agent's operation doesn't end there. He manages to infiltrate the villain's lair and capture the leader. Mark realizes who the traitor in their department is, but Janice still doesn't tell the truth. She claims she was only working for the CIA. Benford begins interrogating the main suspect. He wants to know how the villain caused the global blackout, but the scientist is confident that it doesn't matter. Regardless of how the day unfolds, the outcome will be the same. Benford will be dead by nightfall. Dimitri heads to Janice's house and finds Simon there. Hawk sees no other way out. She helps her partner arrest Simon, despite their previous arrangement. Despite warnings, Mark loses control and uses force to find out when the global blackout is planned. Stan realizes that Benford is not in control of himself and orders him to be removed from the office. At 6 in the evening, thousands of people gather in the streets to celebrate April the 29th, the day from the visions. Lloyd arrives at Olivia's house to ensure events unfold correctly, but the woman also decides to change her fate and leaves town with Charlie. Mark's chain of events also changes. He starts a brawl in a bar and ends up in a jail cell. With just over an hour left until the moment of truth, all the characters find themselves in different places, but Stan posts bail for Mark, and everything starts to fall into place. The agents return to the bureau due to a report of planted explosives. At the same time, Lloyd finds Olivia and asks her to return home so they can recreate the evening from their shared memories. The scientist's plan begins to unfold. Dylan writes the formula he saw Lloyd use on the mirror. The FBI building is attacked by masked assailants, but this doesn't stop Mark, and he finds himself in his place at the map with the clues. Simon infiltrates the corporation's server room to hack the computer and prevent another blackout. At the appointed time, Lloyd calls Mark and gives the date of the next blackout, the next 48 hours. Thanks to Gabriel's notebook, Benford learns the exact time. The blackout will happen in 12 minutes. The masked criminals destroy Mark's office and all his work, but the agent survives and tries to fight back. Simon notices that someone has remotely taken control of the program and he cannot stop it. Dimitri suspects the scientist did it on purpose, but Simon swears he is trying to prevent the catastrophe. Mark manages to warn his boss about the next blackout, but he can't get out of the building and is once again surrounded by armed mercenaries. With 30 seconds left before the explosion, Mark runs for the exit, but at that moment the mechanism activates, and the world freezes again, glimpsing into its future. This is where the series ends. And the film takes place in the small town of Vengenberg, where a young girl named Yennefer lives with a skewed face and a disgusting hump in the family of a cowman. Because of her ugly appearance, the girl is constantly mocked by the locals, and one day when Yennefer is once again mocked by a couple of local young men, the girl accidentally opens a portal to the magical Tor Lara in Aretuza, where she's met by the young wizard Istrid. The guy's concerned. All magic leaves traces, which wizards can use to find someone who has even an ounce of magic in them. He decides to save the budding sorceress and opens a safe portal that brings Yennefer home. Time later, a beautiful and wealthy lady arrives at the farm of the girl's father to buy a pig. But upon seeing the girl, she expresses a desire to buy her too. And the father, who does not hide his disgust for his daughter, sells her for half the price of the animal, despite the pleas of her mother, who recognizes the lady as a witch. So Yennefer finds herself in the magical school of the Enchantress Tissaia of Rees, where several girls are already studying. At first, Yennefer takes the separation from home hard and how low her father judged her. She even tried to commit suicide, but when classes begin, she discovers that the young wizard was right. It was her inadvertent wizardry that caused the wave and caught the attention of the school's rector, the wizardess Tissaia. The girls who study at the school have also distinguished themselves with the same unique skills. Soon Tissaia holds the first test. The girls must lift a stone and a flower without touching them, and using a spell. Everyone more or less manages to cope with the task, but Yennefer fails. The girl stubbornly tries again and again until Tissaia stops her. Frustrated, Yennefer runs away. Later, she finds Istrid in the cave and tells him her name. Sometime later, Tissaia trains her female pupils to recognize man's greatest fear. She sees the girls in pairs and orders them to look into each other's eyes until they get inside their rival schemes. Yennefer pairs up to encourage the girl, but she again fails. Tissaia is enraged. Yennefer is useless. And this is because she's lying to herself. Even if she were a beauty, no one would love her. Although she's not the only one to whom she has problems, Yennefer shares the problems with her only friend, Istrid, who talks about her schooling. He too was having a hard time with everything. The boy offers to read his mind, and the girl succeeds. One night, Tissaia wakes the girls in the middle of a storm and takes them to the Tor Lara, the most powerful magic place in the continent, entrance to which is only open to members of the Wizard Brotherhood. Today, there will be a test in the art of controlling the flows of chaos, which requires catching lightning in a bottle. The girls do not believe in such a possibility, and some get strong discharges even after catching the lightning. Yennefer's turn comes and she reaches up with the bottle, but it is thrown back against the wall. Enraged, she directs her power at her more fortunate opponent, Tissaia, blocking her mental blow. Later, she reprimands her apprentice she almost killed today, which means that her emotions can ruin her own. Tissaia cannot be sure that Yennefer will not go along with her feelings and harm his school, for she's to become a court sorceress, and the weak have no place near a ruler. The enchantress already doubts that there's anything in her that the wizarding chapter needs. Frustrated, Yennefer tells Istrid everything. But most importantly, the enchantress knows all about them and they won't be able to see each other again. The guy is willing to show her other, more ancient and powerful magic, but it is very dangerous. He shows her the skulls of the dead elves who built Aretuza. They were the first wizards of the continent, and they were the ones who built all the magical places. But humans came to the continent and slaughtered them. Istrid gives her a flower that can only grow where the elder blood rests and reads a spell, which by repeating it the girl opens a portal. The astonished wizard does not understand how she managed to do it the first time, and Yennefer confesses that her real father was a half-elf who died in the purge. It was his blood that made her ugly. The boy kisses Yennefer and confesses his love. Later, she shows Tissaia the flower. It turns out that this was her assignment, to get the plant by applying the skills of false emotion. Yennefer hopes to be elevated. The enchantress promises that she will soon hear a knock and know when it is time. Meanwhile, Istrid is also reporting to his mentor Stregobor about what he has learned about the girl. One night, Yennefer hears a knock at her neighbor's door and, taking the flower, goes after them. She peeks out as Tissaia turns the four of them into eels. The enchantress knows the girl is here and orders her to come out and push her former fellow students into the water. They are now the conduits of magic for Aretuza. Yennefer performs this and then sees many silhouettes of former schoolmates in the water. Time passes. Yennefer enjoys a love affair with Istrid, applying what she has learned to enhance the effect of intimacy. Thus, one day she created a whole crowd that watched her intimacy and then rewarded the lovers with applause. The guy is amazed at her imagination. What will she come up with next time? So the day of the final rite is approaching, after which they will be masters of their own destiny. Yennefer dreams of graduating from Aretuza and returning to her native Aedirn as a powerful sorceress to show her longtime abusers and her father what she's been able to achieve. In addition, all Aretuza graduates are perfected before being sent to the different kingdoms. All physical defects are removed, which awaits Yennefer as well. The wizard in charge shows her his work, the flawless beauty of the graduates, and promises her an equally wonderful result. He suggests making her color a noble but strong gray. Tissaia, on the other hand, teaches her to look in the mirror and see what Yennefer herself wants. She orders the girl to close her eyes and imagine the most powerful woman in the world. Yennefer complies with the order but does not yet see the promised beauty. Meanwhile, the chapter of wizards gathers in Aretuza to decide where their graduates should go, for all kings need court wizards. Then it transpires that one of the leaders of the council, the wizard Stregobor, knows that Yennefer is a quarter elf, which means that she will not be accepted at Aretuza, where there is a prejudice against elves. The chapter vows to send Yennefer to Nilfgaard, which the aspiring enchanter does not like. She demands an audience with the chapter, but Tissaia declares herself in charge of the distribution. Yennefer is beside herself. She has no intention of wasting her life serving the king of a small southern kingdom and a lover of women. The tutor reminds her of the elven blood, and the girl understands how Stregobor knew about it. The initiation ceremony begins, which Yennefer does not attend. Worried, Istrid finds her behind a letter to her father asking him to confirm that she's his own daughter. The boy does not believe that this letter can convince the chapter. But the girl simply does not know what to do, for even if Istrid disproves his words about her origins, no one will believe him anymore. The enchanter is frustrated. He didn't know why Stregobor needed this information, and she has already missed all the initiation spells. Istrid suggests that she should go with him, for he has been offered to become an explorer. They can travel the continent and discover the unknowable. But unexpectedly, the girl cruelly ridicules his plan. She's not going to dig through the dust of the ages at all, and these are his dreams and intentions, and her opinion, as always, he does not even ask. Istrid is shocked. Yennefer is not at all what he thought she was, and he expresses his opinion that she's angry because she missed her chance to find beauty. But a girl needs power, and she didn't experience so much hardship studying at the magic school for nothing. Yennefer runs to the enchanter who is in charge of perfection and demands to show her art. Not even the lack of a potion to dull the terrible pain that accompanies the transformation process stops her. As the magician begins the process, Yennefer asks for her eyes and the cut marks on her hands as a reminder of her former weakness, and the wizard informs her that every magic has a price. Having been reborn, she will not be able to walk, but the girl agrees to everything, even to the removal of her womb necessary for a complete transformation. The magician reads spells and the girl screams in terrible pain and rips the chains with which she was tied to the table. Her spine straightens, her entire body seems to melt and shift from one form to another. Finally, writhing in pain, Yennefer loses consciousness. Meanwhile, in the main hall of Aretuza, the initiation ball continues. Suddenly, Tisaya sees a door opening in which stands an unusually beautiful girl with violet eyes. She realizes that Yennefer has disobeyed her orders and hurries to take her away. But it is too late. The Aedern ruler has already noticed the beauty. He invites her to a dance where he expresses his desire to see her as court wizard in his kingdom. Tisaya has to retreat and only watch the dance of the king and the enchantress from afar. Directed based on a series of books by Sapkowski, The Witcher is quite curious, fascinating and vivid. The atmosphere of magic, the world of monsters and steel swords transferred quite well, so the adventures of the female protagonist will be even more exciting in the next episodes. In a cabin in the middle of the forests of North Carolina, two people live, a woman named Nydia and her blind son Solomon. The only thing left from the father, a hunter, is an audio recording where he explains to the boy that they were forced to move to this place in the hope that his mother would be able to heal. But the hope was in vain. Nydia's condition only worsened. On that day, the mother calls her son to check the traps. Before leaving the house, the boy habitually ties a rope to his belt, the other end of which is attached to the porch. This measure is necessary so that the child can always find his way home, and so that the mother knows in which direction to look for him if something happens. The woman teaches Solomon how to set and find traps for animals, and approves of how quickly he learns. Later, she shows him how to properly skin animals without damaging the fur, which can then be used to make clothing. One day, the curious boy catches an insect and traps it in a jar, only to be saddened when he notices that the beetle no longer makes any sound. The mother explains that living creatures cannot survive like this. They need air, food, and water. One day, the woman suggests that the child go fishing to celebrate the birthday of his deceased father, who loved this activity and always took Solomon with him. Afterward, she plans to bake a cake, which excites the boy. The pair head to the river. Suddenly, Solomon notes that all the animals and birds seem to have disappeared, and a ringing silence surrounds them. The woman, who also notices this, jokes that they were scared of the boy and warn the fish in the river. The boy relaxes, but the unpleasant feeling remains in his soul. Sitting by the shore, he suddenly asks questions about death. Nydia is surprised but explains that death is simply a change of existence, like a chrysalis turning into a butterfly. Life continues but in a different form. But why is Solomon interested in this? After all, he is young, full of energy, and will live for a long time. After sitting by the shore with their fishing rods and not getting a bite, the woman suggests that the boy dig up some worms. He happily agrees and ventures deeper into the forest. The boy finds some worms near a rotten tree and feels an iron chain under the leaves. But as soon as he tries to pull it to find out where it leads, the mother arrives, sensing something suspicious in the forest. She praises her son for finding the worms, but suggests they finish fishing for the day. The pair return home, where the mother tends to the household chores, the garden and the goat, which provides them with milk. Solomon helps dig up root vegetables. The mother praises her son for his help, hiding that she feels worse and worse. In the evening, she bakes the promised cake and suggests that her son sing the traditional song, but the boy doesn't like it. Then Nydia offers to let him blow out the candle on the cake in front of him, and Solomon fulfills the request, but he refuses to share his wish, believing it won't come true if he does. At night, the mother plays an audio recording she and the boy's father made for little Solomon. They tell a story about a little goat that once ran into the forest where a terrible monster lived. The parents loved their little goat very much and were inconsolable, but the goat, seeing the monster, managed to escape and return home, bringing great joy to his mother and father. They hugged him, and he promised never to return to the dark forest again. After listening to the story again, Solomon again raises the question of death, as he didn't understand his mother's earlier explanation. Then Nydia tells him about faith, However, the boy barely understands and declares that he believes in his mother above all else. The years pass, but one day the mother disappears, leaving the boy only a recording of her voice, in which she says goodbye to her son and reminds him of the three main rules of their life. He must always share with the forest everything he gets from it, half for him, half for the forest. The second rule, when he feels down and ready to give up, he must sing their song. And the third rule, he must never take off the rope. Time passes. Solomon becomes a teenager. He has fully adapted to life alone, hunting, fishing, chopping wood, and checking traps on his own. When he feels particularly sad, he listens to the tapes with the voices of his loved ones. One day while eating near the house, the boy hears a strange sound from the thicket. Putting down his plate, he rushes into the forest but finds nothing unusual, though he senses someone's presence nearby. Before bed, he listens to his mother's voice recording again. However, he cannot sleep. The boy gets up and leaves the house. Then he hears the plaintive bleating of his goat and runs towards the sound until the rope reaches its limit. At the very edge of the rope's reach, he manages to feel the goat's body in the grass, but at that moment, something unknown grabs the animal and drags it into the depths of the forest. Feeling his hands, the boy realizes they are covered in blood and tries to wipe it off. Morning comes. Solomon is frightened but continues to live according to his established routine, but one day he suddenly hears a gunshot in the forest. The boy rushes in that direction and stumbles upon a dead deer. But then, a man emerges from the trees, claiming it as his kill. Frightened, Solomon begins to wave his knife, and the stranger is forced to knock him out with the butt of his rifle. The boy comes to his senses, near his house. The hunter, sitting opposite, tends to his wound, apologizing for the harm caused. He read the name on the knife, Lucas, and assumes that's the boy's name. But the boy admits that it was his father's name, who is now gone. The hunter apologizes again, saying he didn't mean to scare him, and noticing the rope, he carried him back to the house. Hank, the man's name, asks the young man why he lives alone and where his parents are, as the boy looks very young. But Solomon doesn't answer. The day is already ending, so the hunter asks for permission to spend the night in the house. In return, he offers some painkillers. When the boy refuses, as he doesn't know what pills are, Hank promises to cook a hot meal from the deer, and Solomon agrees. Hank examines the house from the inside and realizes that the young man has never left its boundaries and therefore simply doesn't know about the outside world. Meanwhile, the boy listens to his mother's last message, huddled in the corner of his room, feeling uncomfortable in the presence of a stranger. Hank finds homemade books that Solomon's mother made for him and feels sorry for the boy. He behaves kindly and generously offers the young man the soup he prepared. He again offers to help the boy, saying he can guide him to people and help him settle into the big world. But Solomon refuses, which Hank attributes to his deep love for home, lamenting that he himself doesn't have one. He again asks about the parents, saying the boy looks a lot like the woman in the photo, perhaps that is his mother. After dinner, they go to bed, though Solomon doesn't part with his knife, but realizing that Hank poses no threat, he finally lies down. However, in the middle of the night, both are awakened by a loud and terrifying sound, similar to the roar of an unknown animal. Hank, armed with a flashlight and rifle, goes outside to check what's happening. It's quiet around the house, and the man heads into the forest. Soon he finds blood traces at the base of a tree and realizes that some animal has died there. On the tree itself there are bloody marks and the bark is scraped off. Stopping, Hank surveys the area through his scope and notices something suspicious in the bushes. He fires, but the creature leaps from behind the tree with a terrifying roar and charges at him. Realizing he missed, the hunter runs. Reaching the house, he sees Solomon in some sort of trance. The boy just sways from side to side, humming a tune to himself, and doesn't respond to the man's questions. Hank, getting no answers, leaves him alone. After all, he believes he scared off the beast, and now they are safe. The man promises to get the boy out of the forest so he can live a normal life, unafraid of any monster. In the morning, Hank finds Solomon in the shed. He offers to repair it since all the necessary materials are there, except for the chain. Solomon recalls finding a chain in the forest as a child and takes Hank to the spot. The man marvels at how the boy navigates using the rope. The boy explains that it's the only way to survive. Soon they find the place. Hank, noticing the chain, grabs it and starts pulling, but realizing it's tied to something, he follows it and finds some kind of burrow. Nearby lie metal shears, which surprises Hank. However, he cuts off a piece of the chain and returns with it to the house. While the man works on the repairs, Solomon asks for a piece of venison, and after receiving permission, throws it into the bushes. To the hunter's surprise, the boy explains that it's a rule. Everything taken from the forest must be shared with it, as his parents taught him. The hunter believes this practice explains the appearance of the beast they heard at night. He suggests they set a trap for the monster to ensure the boy's safety. He also extends the rope, giving the young man the ability to explore new areas. Soon they both head in the direction where Hank saw the unknown beast. Cautiously moving between the trees, they reach the edge of the previously marked area. Suddenly, something unknown grabs the rope and starts pulling Solomon. The terrified hunter chases after the boy, and catching up with the abandoned Solomon, immediately leads him back to the house. Hank tries to calm the young man, assuring him that the beast won't enter the house and they will definitely catch it in the traps they set. He also found his mother's diary and offers to read it to Solomon. The boy listens intently, a thoughtful smile appearing as he hears the lines filled with love and tenderness directed at him. But suddenly Hank stops reading mid-sentence, having read something terrifying. Not wanting to scare the boy, he assures him it's already late and they should go to sleep. As always, Solomon listens to his mother's recording before bed and then goes to sleep. Meanwhile, Hank, making sure the boy's asleep, leaves the house and heads to the place where they found the chain. He approaches the burrow, sees a pile of gnawed bones in front of it, and realizes that this is the lair of the beast. Meanwhile, Solomon wakes up and begins to search for his new friend, and Hank, with his rifle ready, approaches the burrow and suddenly sees a notebook similar to the one in Solomon's house. But this one is scribbled with simple doodles. Deciding that the find has no value, the man puts it back. Meanwhile, realizing that Hank is not around, Solomon sits on the porch and turns on the tape recorder, listening to his mother's voice. But at that moment, he hears a gunshot in the forest. Finding the rope, Solomon runs into the forest, where he suddenly stumbles over Hank's backpack and realizes that the man is somewhere nearby. At that moment, the rope's length ends. For the first time in his life, Solomon breaks the rule and takes it off to find his friend. He crawls around and finds Hank's lifeless body. Solomon mourns his loss when he hears someone standing before him. The terrifying, disheveled creature turns out to be Solomon's mother. Making inhuman sounds, she charges at him, but the chain restrains her. To drive away his fear, Solomon begins to hum the childhood melody. This makes the woman stop, and when she begins to hum along, the boy recognizes her. He cautiously approaches her, and when she lunges at him, she impales herself on a knife and dies. Her eyes, with strange vertical pupils, go still. The young man, coughing heavily, leans against a tree. Trying to recover from everything he's been through, he suddenly hears a crow cawing and looks up at the sky. And then, in his milky eyes, vertical pupils appear, meaning that along with his sight, he has inherited his mother's illness, becoming the new forest beast. A depressingly dull film that exudes hopelessness, cold, and a sense of inevitable futility. But the metaphor with the rope is very apt. A person should never lose their connection to home. The episode opens with a flashback, capturing the moment Franklin first encounters Irene in a bar. Their meeting is sparked by a serendipitous pool shot that Franklin uses as an opening to engage Irene in conversation. This marks the beginning of their relationship. Leaping ahead about half a century, the narrative catches up with Franklin and Irene, now an elderly couple, deeply in love. Although Irene is confined to a wheelchair, their affection remains strong. Franklin assists her outside, aiming to share a view of the night sky together. They venture to a shed, where a hidden underground tunnel leads them to an unusual door. Upon entering, they find themselves mysteriously elevated to an interstellar viewing platform, as if transported among the stars. Franklin has observed Irene's growing desire to gaze at the stars more frequently over the last year. They visited their special spot a total of 865 times, with visits increasing since Irene's fall the previous year. Attempting to understand her insistence, Franklin finally confesses that he's grown weary of their regular excursions to the stars. He's ready to hand over their secret responsibility to someone else. However, Irene firmly believes that this mystery is theirs alone to decipher. Meanwhile, their neighbor Byron is suspicious that Franklin and Irene are concealing something in their shed, and he's determined to uncover it. The next morning, as they were driving away, Byron hurried to their car, but Franklin, who views him as an irritating busybody, didn't appreciate the intrusion. Later, while attempting to mow his lawn, Franklin brushes him off completely. Back at his house, Byron shares his suspicions with his wife Janine, who advises him to stay out of their neighbors' affairs, insisting it's none of their business. In the car, Irene suggests that Franklin could be friendlier to Byron, but Franklin dismisses the idea. Irene persists, encouraging him to cultivate friendships rather than focusing solely on her. Later, Franklin and Irene visit the hospital. Irene sees her doctor, who plans to run some tests as her symptoms appear to be worsening, although her exact condition remains unspecified. While Irene was with the doctor, Franklin went to run some errands. He then got a call from his granddaughter Denise and ended up going for lunch with her. She's worried about them, having heard from a neighbor that they're roaming around in the middle of the night going for strolls. Franklin passes it off as simply watching the stars, but Denise is not so sure. She's worried and broaches the idea of them leaving the house. Franklin vehemently declines. While Franklin is away, Irene seizes the opportunity to visit an old friend named Sadie at a care home. During her visit, she is disheartened to see Sadie's deteriorating mental state. Feeling the need to confide in someone, Irene shares her secret with Sadie, explaining that she's been on special journeys but is also grappling with a serious illness. When Franklin returns to pick her up, they both look visibly exhausted, the relentless march of time eroding their mental faculties. This is particularly evident with Franklin, who is showing signs of senility, forgetting essential tasks such as refueling the car and picking up Irene from the doctor's office. At their home, Byron is proudly showing Janine his new campaign sign, excited about his run for councilman. Janine suggests he could delay his campaign until next year, but Byron is eager to start immediately. After their conversation, Byron sneaks over to Irene and Franklin's house to snoop around. While investigating, he receives a text from Janine, prompting him to leave abruptly. Back at home, the conversation turns to the inevitability of death. Irene encourages Franklin to embrace life fully and consider moving on from their home should she pass away before him. After spending a pleasant evening together, Franklin begins to sing to Irene, but soon falls asleep. However, Irene is restless and ready to take action. She writes a note for Franklin, expressing her decision to take control of her situation while she still has the ability. In the note, she promises to see him again and leaves it by the chair as she prepares to leave the house. Irene intends to visit the Martian landscape on her own, a place they've often traveled to together. Just as she is about to leave, she discovers someone lying on the floor, struggling to breathe and desperately seeking her help. The next morning, Franklin is awakened by the sight of Irene crawling toward the house, breathing heavily. She urgently tells him that there's someone in the shed. With concern, Franklin grabs a hammer for protection and goes to investigate. Downstairs, he discovers a stranger doubled over in pain. Franklin immediately assumes the man is a junkie seeking refuge, but Irene senses something more troubling. Adding to the mystery, the man is covered in blood without any visible wounds. Concerned, Franklin decides to call the police. Officer Thomas soon arrives at the scene. He conducts a thorough check of the premises to ensure there are no immediate threats. Meanwhile, the camera subtly focuses on Franklin's back, revealing a patch of blood spatter on his right shoulder, a result of him carrying the bloodied stranger. As Officer Thomas prepares to inspect the upper floor, Irene pulls him aside for a private conversation. She confides in him that Franklin's mental state is deteriorating and that he might be seeing things that aren't there. Her intervention convinces the officer, and he leaves the property under the assumption that the incident was a hallucination on Franklin's part. Meanwhile, the narrative introduces another subplot featuring Stella and her daughter, Tony. They are far from the urban hustle, in the serene mountains leading llamas across the vast, rolling hills, a stark contrast to the urban school environment Tony usually frequents. That evening, Tony welcomes Matthias to their house, believing this could be the beginning of a new friendship. However, unbeknownst to her, Matthias has an ulterior motive. He reveals that he was dared to visit what is rumored to be a haunted house and was offered 4,000 pesos to step inside, casting a shadow over their budding interaction. The local rumors swirling around Tony's grandfather's involvement in cultish activities have piqued the curiosity of the local kids, including Matthias. This revelation devastates Tony, who had mistakenly believed that Matthias's visit was the beginning of a romantic interest. When Stella arrives and finds Tony with Matthias, she quickly intervenes and shoos him away. After dealing with the situation, Stella takes a secretive path to the back of an old church nearby. There, hidden from plain view, is a door that strikingly resembles the one found in Franklin and Irene's shed, suggesting a deeper, mysterious connection between the two locations. Back to Franklin and Irene. As the situation at their home becomes more dire, the stranger on their floor suddenly passes out and starts convulsively shaking. Irene, recognizing the symptoms from a past experience, suspects it could be related to a virus she once battled. She quickly sends Franklin out to get a refill of Tamiflu, hoping it might help. While Franklin is away, Irene takes the opportunity to sift through the stranger's belongings. She finds numerous gold coins and a photograph labeled Gabriel, suggesting a possible identity or connection. With the man coughing uncontrollably and in obvious distress, Irene decides to take matters into her own hands. She prepares a homemade remedy she hopes will alleviate his symptoms and begins to read aloud from a book she found among his possessions, trying to soothe him with her voice. Byron, eager to gather support for his councilman campaign, is out trying to collect signatures from the locals, but he's finding it difficult to get any cooperation. Spotting Franklin entering the pharmacy, Byron seizes the opportunity and approaches him for his signature. However, Franklin declines and hurries inside the pharmacy. Inside, Franklin encounters a new pharmacist who isn't familiar with him or his prescription history. To ensure everything is in order, the pharmacist decides to call the doctor for verification before dispensing any medication. The doctor, wanting to discuss the situation directly, asks to speak with Franklin. This unexpected complication adds another layer to Franklin's already stressful day. Stella, unable to find Tony inside their house, grows anxious and decides to search for her by car. She eventually locates Tony and decides to take her to a restaurant to talk and give her advice over a meal. Tony expresses her feelings of isolation and the mockery she faces from peers because of the mysterious reputation of their house. Stella responds by hinting at a deeper family secret, explaining that every family member is a guardian of something significant, and assures Tony that she will understand her role when the time is right. Their conversation is abruptly interrupted when Stella receives a notification that the alarm at their house has been triggered. Alarmed, they rush back home to check on the situation. Meanwhile, back at Franklin and Irene's place, the stranger regains consciousness and introduces himself as Jude. He's uncertain of his origins, but believes he might be from the mountains. Jude also recalls being carried, which Irene and Franklin assume must have been Franklin's doing, though Franklin has no memory of it. Upon returning with the Tamiflu, Franklin displays a cautious demeanor toward Jude. Unlike Irene, who shows concern and willingness to help, Franklin is reticent and distant, focusing more on Irene as she starts to feel woozy and faint, indicating his primary concern remains her well-being. Denise, who is struggling to stay alert during her lecture, is fortunately assisted by a fellow student named Cliff, who offers her a cup of coffee. This small gesture leads to a connection between the two. They went out for a drink, and she told him about her family, but that was not entirely the truth. She told him she has taken on the significant responsibility of looking after Franklin and Irene. He asked why her father couldn't do it, but she brushed it off, saying he is busy. Meanwhile, a tense conversation unfolds between Franklin and Irene. Franklin confronts Irene about a secret she's been keeping concerning Dr. Maurice's advice. Irene agrees to follow the doctor's instructions, but in return she asks for Franklin's support as she continues to investigate the mysterious doorway and its significance. Although hesitant, Franklin begrudgingly agrees to support her quest. After receiving the notification of the alarm, Stella returns home with a gun, only to discover that an old friend has broken into her house. The intruder questions whether Stella is training Tony, hinting at a connection to the same mysterious elements tied to the doorway. That night, after Franklin has warned Jude not to harm Irene, Jude finds himself unable to sleep. As Denise and Cliff are about to depart, she tells him that she had lied in their conversation earlier, and she told him about her personal challenges, including the emotional weight of her father's voluntary death when she was just 5 years old. Jude quietly takes Irene's letter and stealthily moves through the house. Jude's actions take a startling turn when he retreats to the bathroom with a knife. There, he carefully cuts into his leg, revealing a strange cylindrical object embedded beneath his skin. It appears to be some kind of tracking device. Understanding the implications of being tracked, Jude decisively crushes the device, ensuring it can no longer function. After dealing with the device, he slips out into the night. Franklin delves into the mystery of the gold coins he found among the stranger's belongings. He takes them to a local trader who identifies them as Spanish doubloons, but the exact origin of their minting remains uncertain. Simultaneously, Stella confronts the intruder she found in her home. She sends Tony out and questions him about his presence. He responds by handing her a paper, describing it as a special assignment, and insists that she involve Tony. Meanwhile, Franklin, showing a gesture of care, returns home with a bag of clothes for Jude, the stranger who recently revealed his name. However, he specifically avoids giving Jude any of Michael's belongings, as the memories associated with them are still painfully fresh. Responding to Jude's simple request for food, they all head to a diner. The outing takes an uncomfortable turn when Jude becomes becomes ill and vomits during the ride home. Denise is presented with a significant opportunity by her superior Mark. She's been invited to join a newly forming research group which promises a substantial salary increase but also requires a hefty time commitment. This new role would not only be a step up in her career but would also demand she manage it alongside her ongoing internship, essentially doubling her workload. Faced with the potential benefits and the daunting prospect of increased stress, Denise feels torn and unsure about whether to accept the offer. Throughout these events, fragments of Jude's past begin to surface in his mind. He recalls snippets of his life before arriving at the Yorks, including a conflict with another individual. Byron comes under fire for forging signatures on his campaign. He received a call, and he was told to put his campaign in suspension to not face legal matters. Franklin, acting on Irene's suggestion, takes Jude out for some male bonding in an attempt to better understand the mysterious guest. They spend the day playing chess, a setting that gives Franklin ample time to evaluate Jude's character and intentions. Despite the shared activity, Franklin's suspicions grow, and he concludes that Jude might be a con artist. Convinced that it's best for Jude to leave, Franklin decides to give him $5,000 to help him on his way and drives him to the bus station. However, as Jude prepares to board the bus, Franklin begins to have second thoughts about his decision. The complexity of the situation and perhaps a sense of unresolved doubt lead Franklin to reluctantly invite Jude back, allowing him another chance to prove his intentions and possibly clarify his mysterious connection to their family. At home, Irene makes a startling discovery among Jude's possessions, a mysterious orb that seems to have the ability to disintegrate matter. When she places it on the coffee table, the table vanishes without a trace, leaving her both amazed and alarmed. Meanwhile, Denise decides to visit her grandparents and encounters Jude, who they introduce as their new caretaker. Denise is skeptical of Jude, especially given the peculiar circumstances of his arrival and the strange incidents surrounding him. Although Irene suggests that Denise should head home rather than stay the night, Denise leaves, but not without instructing Jude on her grandparents' needs and expectations. She opts to stay with a friend, driven by a resolve to uncover Jude's true identity. Later that night, Jude has a private conversation with Irene. He confides that he believes his presence at their home is no coincidence. Jude reveals that he is searching for his father, named Gabriel, the same name on the Polaroid found earlier, and he seeks Irene's assistance in this personal quest. In another part of the house, Franklin discovers a bloodied knife in the bathroom. While cleaning up, he notices fragments of the mysterious orb that Irene had found, now broken and swirling up through the sink. Unfortunately, the water quickly washes them away before Franklin can examine them further, deepening the mystery of the strange object and its capabilities. Byron, undeterred by previous accusations of meddling, finds himself unable to resist the lure of the mysterious activities at the Yorks' residence. Driven by curiosity, he sneaks into their property and makes his way to the shed. Inside, he navigates through the clutter until he confronts the secret door, the very threshold that seems to be the heart of the enigmas surrounding Franklin and Irene. Meanwhile, the narrative shifts back to Stella and Tony. In a parallel scene reminiscent of earlier discoveries, Stella takes Tony to a secretive doorway located behind the chapel, a portal similar to the one in the Yorks' shed, but with a distinct feature. This doorway is equipped with a strange control panel that Stella manipulates to set their destination. After entering a sequence of commands, Stella and Tony step through the doorway and find themselves instantly transported to New York City. The scene unfolds with Jude awakening from a distressing nightmare where he's embroiled in a fierce fight with another man. Shaken, he decides to take the mysterious orb he discovered earlier and buries it outside to keep it safe. As he is digging, Byron appears, asserting that this is a private area. Jude, claiming his role as the caretaker, brushes off Byron's curiosity and leaves without divulging any further information. Meanwhile, Franklin's suspicions about Jude continue to deepen, especially after finding the bloodied knife. Determined to uncover Jude's true identity, Franklin visits Officer Thomas, hoping to persuade him to conduct a DNA test on the knife. However, Thomas dismisses the need for such measures, viewing Franklin's elaborate theories as further evidence of his deteriorating mental state. In another part of town, Jude and Irene visit a library where Jude searches through records and discovers that his father had been arrested due to homelessness and claimed amnesia at the time of his arrest. When Irene shares this information with Franklin, he responds with a lighthearted joke, suggesting that forgetfulness must run in Jude's family. Elsewhere, where Stella and Tony are navigating their own mysterious venture with a contact named Nick. He leads them to an abandoned warehouse where a machine starts emitting what appears to be serial numbers. Nick explains that while he can help narrow down their search, he will need to accompany them to accurately pinpoint the source of the signal. Throughout this ordeal, Tony remains confused and uncertain about the overarching purpose of their mission, highlighting her struggle to grasp the full scope of their enigmatic activities. Denise finds a temporary respite from her demanding schedule by staying at her friend Katie's place. She wakes up there one morning and opens up about the extreme stress she's been under lately, finding comfort in sharing her struggles with a friend. Back at Irene and Franklin's home, tensions rise to a breaking point. Franklin, increasingly troubled by the unfolding events, accuses Irene of favoring Jude over him. Despite Irene's attempts to clarify her intentions and reassure him, Franklin remains skeptical about the situation and abruptly leaves the house, overwhelmed by doubt and frustration. In a parallel scenario, Byron, who has been actively campaigning for a council seat, reaches a moment of disillusionment. In a symbolic gesture of giving up on his political aspirations, he burns all his campaign signs. As he does this, he notices Franklin driving away. Byron tries to offer a friendly smile and greeting, but the moment is fleeting. After Franklin's departure, Irene confronts Jude about his secretive demeanor. She expresses her concerns about him not sharing details of his life, to which Jude responds with a pained smile, acknowledging her care despite his reticence. Chandra, a nurse who previously worked in the caretaker's house, arrives at Irene and Franklin's home under the guise of offering her freelance services. She reveals that she's now freelancing, though in reality, she was fired for stealing. When Irene informs her that Jude has taken over caretaker duties, Chandra asks to use the bathroom, handing Irene her business card to distribute to any friends in need of her services. However, seizing the opportunity, she sneakily enters Jude's room after her bathroom visit and steals something from him. Meanwhile, Jude handles a phone call with Dale from the pawnbrokers, who speaks about the significant value of the gold coins associated with Jude. Jude, pretending to be Franklin's son during the call, is visibly unsettled by the conversation about the coin's value. After the call, Jude contacts someone, possibly seeking advice or information about the coins. The conversation is cryptic, with the person on the other end uttering Fiat voluntas Dei, which translates to God's will be done, suggesting a deeper, possibly religious or philosophical significance to the coins. Shortly after, Irene comes by to pay Jude for his work and reassures him of her support, irrespective of the mystery surrounding him. However, after Chandra's earlier visit, Jude discovers that an item, a rectangular slab previously hinted at, is missing from his belongings. He quickly connects the theft to Chandra, snatches her business card from the dresser, and heads to the local bar, presumably to track her down and retrieve his stolen item. At a local bar, a series of unexpected encounters and revelations unfold. Jude, who is trying to track down Chandra, ends up at the same bar where Denise and her friend Katie are unwinding. Denise approaches Jude, and they strike up a lively interaction involving shots and dancing. Meanwhile, Byron finds himself in a pool hall where he unexpectedly runs into Franklin. The two begin playing pool, and Byron confronts Franklin about a recent campaign stunt, suspecting Franklin had tipped off the authorities. Franklin firmly denies these allegations, and despite an initially frosty interaction, the two men find common ground. Franklin confides his fears about Irene's feelings toward him, while Byron shares his own personal struggles about feeling like a second choice to his wife, Janine, whom he describes as a consolation prize. Their conversation deepens, and both men, now heavily intoxicated, step outside the bar. Here, Byron admits he may have misjudged Franklin and probes about the mysterious doorway. Franklin, trying to dismiss it as merely a bomb shelter, is finally persuaded by Byron's persistence to show him the site. However, when they reach the supposed transportive shelter, it fails to operate, leaving Byron to laugh it off as a hoax, thinking it's just a bizarre construction. Simultaneously, Irene wakes to find Jude missing and decides to drive out to find him. As she searches, Jude, leaving the bar, is stopped by the police. The confrontation triggers traumatic memories of a past altercation where he had to defend himself, explaining the previously noted blood. As Irene drives past, she sees Jude face down on the hood of a police car, being detained, a sight that shocks and worries her about his fate. In the police station, Irene confronts a distressed Jude, who has run off and now finds himself entangled in a legal predicament. Urging him to be honest, Irene demands the truth if she is to help him. Jude, finally opening up, reveals that he was held in an isolated compound designed to guard the secret of the doorway, an enigmatic portal leading to what he describes as a barren alien planet, not the symbolic gateway others might believe it to be. Jude further explains that the blood found on him was from an altercation with men who tried to prevent his escape from the compound. The stakes are high, as these individuals, should they find him, intend to kill him. Jude's ultimate mission is to locate Gabriel, who had previously ventured through the same mysterious doorway. With this newfound understanding, Irene manages to persuade the police to release Jude. On their way home, Irene attempts to downplay the significance of her own doorway. However, Jude insists that their doorway is part of a larger destiny, making it one of the most crucial portals among many. Meanwhile, the subplot with Tony, Stella, and Nick sheds light on the scientific and mystical dimensions of the doorways. They discover that the doorways are connected by invisible particles that span vast distances. While Stella views this phenomenon as a divine gift, Nick adheres to a scientific interpretation. Their quest to locate a specific package leads them to a massive transmission tower. Nick breaks into the network to pinpoint the package's location. However, their operation is nearly compromised when a utility worker arrives. Thinking quickly, Stella subdues the worker, securing him to his van's steering wheel with cable ties, thus ensuring their mission continues uninterrupted. As Nick and Tony proceed to their next destination in Illinois, Tony remains quiet, still processing the events from earlier. Meanwhile, Denise visits Irene and Franklin's house while they are at the doctor's, intending to return a jacket Franklin left at the bar. During her visit, she casually inquires about Jude's father, sparking a light-hearted response from him. Their interaction is interrupted by Irene, who returns with positive news from the doctor. Franklin takes a proactive step towards proving the existence of the alien landscape by handing Byron a disposable camera with undeveloped photos and urging him to get them developed as proof. In another subplot, Irene and Jude visit Chandra's place to recover the items she took. While Irene distracts Chandra with fabricated concerns about Jude, he sneaks upstairs and finds both the strange black trinket and a necklace containing a similar device to what was on his leg. Confronting Chandra, she defensively claims the items were gifts from those at the care home. Irene, seeking further information, promises to keep Chandra's secret in exchange for the source of the necklace. This revelation links the necklace to the tracking devices, explaining why Jude was so keen to destroy the one in his leg. Byron, having developed the photos, finds evidence of the alien world, capturing images of Irene and Franklin in that setting. Meanwhile, Stella, in a distressing episode in the woods, experiences flashbacks of her mother's death, adding emotional depth and backstory to her character. Byron's curiosity leads him to research conspiracy theories online, where he discovers a reference to the impossible door, a concept sketched by an Argentine missionary in 1723, which he connects to their mysterious doorway. Back at the doorway, Franklin and Byron inspect the area and notice bloody fingerprints on the control panel, the same type found at Stella's portal. Upon opening the control panel, they realize the orb is missing, which Jude had previously buried. Byron, piecing together clues from his observations in the woods, locates the buried jar and recovers the orb, further entangling himself in the mysteries surrounding the doorway and its secrets. The scene opens with a strained atmosphere at the dinner table, where Irene casually discusses teaching Jude how to drive. Franklin, however, remains detached from the conversation, his disinterest culminating in him excusing himself to take out the trash. During this mundane chore, he stumbles upon a letter from Irene, the contents of which shake his very foundations. Confronted with his feelings, Franklin accuses Jude of bringing turmoil into their home. Jude's retort, questioning the true source of the household's issues, leaves Franklin even more unsettled, prompting him to walk away from the confrontation. Meanwhile, in Illinois, Tony and Stella settle into a motel for the night. The situation escalates when Nick, having brought the orb with him, carelessly plays with it in the presence of a hired companion. Stella intervenes, dismissing the hooker and sternly reminding Nick of the peril they face, citing the tragic fate of his brother as a grim warning. Elsewhere, Byron, brimming with excitement, catches up with Franklin to discuss his discovery of the orb. However, Franklin, overwhelmed by personal troubles, dismissively informs Byron that he's preoccupied with other matters. In a significant turn of events, Denise decides to quit school, a decision that has been looming for several chapters. Her friend reacts negatively, driving Denise to leave and join Jude on his quest. Jude shares new details about his father, Gabriel, who similarly had to cut a tracker out of his leg after escaping shadowy pursuers. Returning to the domestic front, Franklin, after spending a night at Byron's, confronts Irene about the discovered letter and her perceived broken promises. The confrontation underscores the deep fractures in their marriage, revealing a relationship in crisis. Concurrently, Byron attempts to operationalize the orb by placing it in the control panel in the basement shed. Despite his efforts, the mechanism fails to activate due to insufficient power. Tensions between Nick and Stella continue to simmer, with Nick provocatively mentioning Stella's late brother, Caleb. Stella reacts violently, punching ditching Nick and leaving him with a bloody nose as she takes off with the van, stranding him at the motel. Jude, driven by the quest to trace his father's footsteps, decides to embark on a road trip to a remote area in Michigan. Denise, eager for the journey and the stories it may uncover, joins him. Irene, seeking a sense of adventure and perhaps a new purpose beyond her routine life, decides to accompany them, despite Franklin's decision to stay behind. For Franklin, their marriage and the life they built together have always been sufficient, but Irene yearns for more, highlighting a growing divide between their desires and aspirations. Back at home, Franklin handles unexpected business regarding the Spanish doubloons. He receives a call from Dale, the pawnbroker, who is eager to learn more about the origin of these rare coins. Franklin is bewildered, especially since it was Jude who initially dealt with Dale about the coins. Unable to provide answers and feeling confused, Franklin hangs up. This interruption is timely, as Byron urgently summons him to show him something new. Byron leads Franklin to the basement of the shed, where he has set up a large generator. His plan is to charge the circuitry connected to the doorway, hoping to provide enough power to activate it. They proceed with the setup, and the activation causes a massive surge of energy. The blast sends shock waves through the neighborhood, disrupting electrical systems and affecting the natural environment, evidenced by flickering lights and birds dropping from the sky. Simultaneously, Stella and Tony, who had been tracking related anomalies, receive a precise ping on their equipment indicating the location they need to head towards, spurred by the energy surge from the doorway. In the shed's basement, the power-up is successful, and Franklin and Byron find themselves transported to the alien viewpoint. They are greeted by a breathtakingly beautiful vista, a stark contrast to the mundane world they've left behind. Overwhelmed by the beauty and the surreal experience, Byron expresses a desire to explore further, but this time, Franklin, who has previously been apprehensive about such adventures, admits that he is no longer afraid. This moment marks a significant personal breakthrough for Franklin, reflecting his readiness to embrace the unknown. Franklin reveals to Byron the spacesuits he's been designing for years, but never had the courage to use. Inspired, Byron vows to help make them functional. Meanwhile, Irene, Jude, and Denise arrive in Michigan at the home of a woman named Hannah, who recognizes Gabriel from a Polaroid Jude shows her. She explains that she and Gabriel were once romantically involved, but he disappeared 15 years ago without a trace. Feeling their trip might be futile, Irene considers heading back, but Hannah persuades them to stay overnight. That evening, Irene hears a suspicious noise upstairs, but is reassured by Hannah that it's nothing. Unknown to the guests, Hannah enters a hidden room where a man named Paul is monitoring everything. They discuss making contact with Franklin after Paul plays a voicemail from him about the coins. Back home, Byron skips Janine's barbecue to focus on his project with Franklin. During a tense conversation, Janine admits she reported Byron's campaign forgery out of a desire for a simpler life, revealing a deep rift between their aspirations. Denise confronts Irene, feeling pushed away, and Irene admits she feels guilty about Michael's past struggles, believing she doesn't deserve Denise's love. Overcome with emotion, Irene apologizes, and they share a heartfelt embrace, understanding each other better through flashbacks of Michael's depression. Meanwhile, Tony finds a video of Jude singing karaoke, which leads Stella to confirm that Jude is the apostate they've been looking for. Tony calls Nick for help in tracing Jude's steps. On another front, Byron and Franklin test the spacesuits they've been working on. Byron explores the alien landscape, excitedly communicating back to Franklin until he goes silent after claiming to have found something incredible. Left alone, Franklin fears the worst, struggling with guilt and concern over Byron's sudden disappearance. Irene takes Denise into the shelter to explain the turmoil she's been experiencing. She shares that after Michael's voluntary death, she struggled to find a reason to continue living and hoped the portal might help her cope with her grief. Irene confesses that her intention was to shield Denise from the portal's complexities, but Jude's arrival has caused events to spiral out of control. Feeling betrayed by the deception, Denise walks away, upset by the revelations. Meanwhile, Tony and Stella encounter Chandra and a sinister man on the shore. The man exchanges gold doubloons worth much more than the $3,000 Chandra demands for information about Jude. After obtaining what he needs, the man abruptly kills Chandra, retrieves the doubloons, and warns that he will ensure Stella remains tough. He then sets Chandra and her car on fire, leaving Tony to witness the horrifying scene from a distance. Jude panics upon realizing the orb is missing from the garden. Meanwhile, Franklin searches for Byron on the observatory deck, but finds no trace of him, leaving both men distressed. Janine, worried, questions Franklin about her husband's whereabouts, but he reassures her without giving specifics. Inside, Jude confronts Franklin about the dangers of their endeavor, explaining that there's nothing but wasteland on the alien planet. Stella and Tony discuss their predicament, with Stella admitting they can't escape the man pursuing them. As the man leads Tony to the York house, noticing dead birds signals they're close. He reveals to Tony that Caleb is her father, not Stella's brother. At the garden, Tony finds Franklin held at gunpoint and forced inside. Meanwhile, Jude thanks Denise for her help at the bar, but their chat is cut short when Stella starts shooting, causing Jude to flee into the woods. Denise returns to the York house and finds herself and her grandparents also at gunpoint. The stranger coerces Irene into revealing the doorway's location, then heads to the shed. Irene comforts a distraught Tony, who doubts their mission and condemns their actions, citing Chandra's death as a stark contradiction to their supposed divine mission. The stranger alters his plans and informs Stella, using the family as leverage to capture Jude, known as the apostate. Upon his arrival, Jude is assaulted by the man, hinted to have been sent by an unidentified woman, though details remain vague. During a scuffle, Franklin manages to overpower the stranger, who is then tasered, bound, and gagged. Stella and Tony, with the captive in tow, leave their old lives behind, driven away with a new bargaining chip. Simultaneously, Jude and Denise decide to escape through the doorway to Bangkok, distancing themselves from the chaos. Irene resolves to limit their use of the mysterious doorway, dismissing its once-thought potential, which Franklin accepts with a mix of relief and determination to resolve unfinished business regarding Byron's fate. As Stella and Tony are ambushed and forced off the road by Hannah and her associates, the tension escalates. Hannah confronts Cornelius, the bound stranger, intensifying the conflict. Meanwhile, the couple embarks on another journey to an unknown alien planet. However, Franklin experiences a system failure in his oxygen supply, causing him to lose consciousness. Irene follows him, bravely entering the alien environment without a spacesuit to help him. It turns out the atmosphere of this planet is suitable for human life. She removes her husband's helmet, and together they discover an ancient city beyond the hill. It turns out that guardians of humanity have been living here for about 100,000 years. They are the ones who built hundreds of quantum portals on Earth and many other planets. This is where the first season ends. We were left with a setup for the second season, but unfortunately the series was cancelled. 2157. A voiceover narrates, Earth has forgotten about wars and famine. Nature has revived. Medicine has conquered deadly diseases. Humanity is exploring unknown planets, entrusting the search for extraterrestrial life in deep space to students full of strength, courage, and a belief in goodness. A young man named Max embarks on another flight. Suddenly, his spacecraft is damaged by an asteroid and makes an emergency landing on an unknown planet. Max steps outside, and immediately his shuttle explodes, leaving him without communication. But he doesn't despair, and first of all, decides to explore. By all parameters, the planet resembles Earth, and the astronaut hopes to find help and maybe a communication system here. But an indigenous inhabitant captures him in the forest. To understand the language of this planet, Max inserts a translator capsule into his ear. The indigenous person, named Zeph, turns Max over to the authorities. They put a helmet on Max that can project a person's thoughts and memories onto a screen and begin the interrogation. At the same time, in a nearby room, Corporal Gaius is assigned to transport Max to the capital as a subconvoy. Here, Max senses a strange signal, and everyone around starts chanting the anthem of the guard. Later, they pass by a strange tower, which, according to Gaius, serves to protect against enemies. Suddenly, its base explodes, and the structure collapses onto the road. Gaius is trapped inside the car, but Max pulls the corporal out. It turns out that this act was carried out by the rebels, the main enemies of the supreme authority of the state. The two men reach the capital on foot. Meanwhile, the head of the Department of Special Research, known as the Wanderer, summons his subordinate named Fank and instructs him to deliver Max to the department. Fank takes Max away, while the Republic's prosecutor reports that the Wanderer has taken in a strange savage and instructs gathering all available information about it. Then it's time to activate the towers, and everyone prepares in their own way. The prosecutor enters the bathroom and clamps a special stick between his teeth. Meanwhile, Fank has a seizure, and while soldiers assist him, Max manages to escape from the vehicle. The shocked young man walks through the city, marveling at the unfamiliar and incomprehensible life. Meanwhile, the unknown fathers gather for a meeting, as they call the rulers of this planet. After a long walk, Max enters a local cafe where he stands up for a waitress who was insulted by one of the patrons. The grateful girl introduces herself as Rada. It turns out that she is the sister of Corporal Gaius. While escorting her home, Max gets into a brawl with a street gang and defeats them. Impressed, Rada takes him to her place. Later, Gaius returns home. Max starts asking questions about the workings of their world and quickly realizes that Rada and Gaius's minds are poisoned by propaganda and false information. Rada is convinced that their planet is hollow and there is no such thing as the sky or space. Meanwhile, Gaius educates his new friend about the political structure of their state, known as Saraksh. The Unknown Fathers are the saviors of the homeland who have stopped wars with the help of defense towers that protect the country from attacks. Nobody knows the Unknown Fathers' true identities because they are not rulers, but public servants. At Max's request, Corporal recommends him for the guard. Max demonstrates a high level of training, which surprises Gaius. The two men often argue about politics, and one day Gaius admits that neighboring states hate Saraksh because they were once a single state united by a common history. Gradually, romantic feelings develop between Max and Rada. They go for walks often and Max tells her about his home planet, Earth, and regrets that his parents believe he is dead. Soon, Max is tasked with catching rebels, whom they identify by their regular seizures reminiscent of epileptic fits. One of the rebels attacks the captain, and Max saves his life, after which the captain suddenly regrets catching them, as they are also human beings. Max reveals that he considered them something like savages. Later, Max attends interrogations and sees that the rebels are not terrorists, as the Unknown Fathers label them, but ordinary people with their ideals and beliefs. Max cannot come to terms with the cruelty of the interrogations and simply cannot believe that someone is paying the rebels to hate the government. Meanwhile, Fank reports to the Wanderer that he has found the savage, while Gaius and Max are summoned to the captain of the guard, who orders Max to execute the arrested rebels. Max leads the condemned to the execution site in the forest, but soon he returns to the commanding officer, drops his gear and weapons, as he has released the arrested rebels and walks away. Max begins to speak about the real and just order of the world that exists on Earth. In response, the captain shoots Max, and Gaius is ordered to write a report about the transfer. Meanwhile, the Unknown Fathers are discussing an attack on neighboring states. The prosecutor advocates for starting a war, and the Chief Father orders them to come up with a pretext, such as an attack on a tower. During this time, Max's body is recovered by the rebels. Among them is a doctor who is astonished because, according to all the rules, Max should have died. He reveals that the Unknown Fathers are a group of conspirators who have seized power and eliminated dissenters, thus diverting the population's attention from poverty and corruption. The towers are transmitters of special radiation that hypnotizes the impoverished people, although most of them do not notice it. The minority, which includes the rebels, experiences excruciating pain. The transmitters are activated twice a day across the country, causing people to go insane and die. Max is recognized as one of their own and taken for an operation to sabotage the tower, organized by the prosecutor through a traitor. Amid gunfire, Max makes his way to the transmitter and detonates it. However, the rebel squad perishes. Max seeks refuge in Rada's apartment, where he reveals everything he has learned about the towers. Gaius does not believe this and suggests that Max should return to his home and take Rada with him. But at that moment, the guards storm the apartment and arrest the men. Max is incarcerated in a prison, where he is recognized by the indigenous Zeph, who is also a rebel. Max tells Zeph about the tower's destruction and the loss of the rebel squad. Meanwhile, the Wanderer asks the prosecutor to hand over Max to him. The prosecutor, however, requests in return to halt the development of more precise transmitters, as he fears that his secret will be revealed since his reaction to the radiation is similar to that of the rebels, meaning he is also a dissenter. Later, Max and other death row inmates are sent to clear the southern borders of the remaining war robots. During this time, the prosecutor learns that Max is immune to the emitters. He decides to break the agreement with the Wanderer and orders Max to be brought to him. The next day, Max attempts to convey to the rebels the idea that they should not destroy the towers one by one but strike at the center where the signal originates. Zeph becomes furious and explains that the towers are not for identifying dissenters. They are active continuously, not just twice a day. The radiation from the towers robs people of their ability to think critically. However, it makes them believe everything that newspapers, radio, teachers, and preachers say. People can be made to believe anything. Only the rebels understand this, as the radiation does not hypnotize them but only inflicts agonizing pain. Zeph continues, there are mutants in the south who are also unaffected by the radiation. However, they have no dealings with humans. Just then, they hear the roar of an engine, and Zeph identifies it as a self-propelled tank, trying to kill them. Max sprints to the tank, climbs inside, and disables the automatic control system. He then informs his friends that he is heading south to find allies and destroy the towers. At the border, the military attempts to stop the tank, and among them, Max recognizes Gaius. Taking him captive, Max breaks through the barricades. On the way, Max tells Gaius about the true situation on this planet, and Gaius becomes convinced of his accuracy when, at the designated time, he is outside the tower's range and does not feel the radiation. Gaius gets angry upon realizing that he has been a puppet of the government all this time, but Max tries to calm him down and reminds him that there are 40 million people like him, and it is for them that he initiated this rebellion. During a stop, residents of the steppes, referred to as mutants, appear near the tank. They behave peacefully and offer food to the travelers. The guys proceed to the ruler of these lands, noting the poverty and destitution of the population. They are told that it is dangerous to live here after the last war, but these people are outcasts with nowhere else to go. Max suggests to their leader, the Duke, to start a rebellion against the unknown fathers, but the mutants are physically and morally too weak to help in the uprising. The mutants propose that the guys seek help from the island empire. However, to do that, they must pass through contaminated lands. So the Duke gifts them an old bomber and the guys take to the sky. During the flight, the bomber is exposed to the radiation from the towers, and Gaius becomes fanatically devoted to Max, obstructing him from piloting. Max struggles to maintain control, and the bomber collides with a tower. Gaius suddenly snaps out of his fanatic state with no recollection of what he had just done. However, their aircraft is shot down by the automated anti-aircraft defense system left over from the previous war. The downed bomber crashes into the sea, but Max and Gaius manage to escape and reach the shore. On the shore, they discover an abandoned submarine, and Max decides to go inside. At the same time, in the city, the prosecutor orders Rada to be brought to him, and his men snatch her off the street. He claims to be Max's friend and shows Rada a recording of his escape. However, she doesn't believe him and refuses to assist the prosecutor in his search for her beloved. Rada is thrown into prison. Meanwhile, Gaius, impatiently waiting for his friend, swims to the submarine where they discover evidence of horrifying experiments conducted on prisoners. The guys reach the control room and view video recordings of mass executions of Gaius's fellow countrymen by the representatives of the island empire whom they were seeking help from. Gaius is horrified by the fact that these monsters could invade his country. It becomes evident that forming an alliance with the empire is not an option. The guys return to the shore where they are met by a coastal patrol. It turns out that a war has broken out with a neighboring state, and like most of the prisoners, they will be sent to the front. Meanwhile, the Wanderer, desiring to lure Max into his department, engineers Rada's escape. He laments how the war has disrupted all his plans and assigns Fank the task of finding and bringing Max back, confessing that he is afraid of him. At the same time, Max and Gaius are dispatched to the front, where they reunite with Zeph. Their commander turns out to be the captain of the guard, who refuses to hand over the Earthling to the arriving Fank. The guys are sent into battle on old tanks when Fank finally locates Max. However, Max refuses to leave his friends and stuns the officer, tossing him into their tank. The battle commences, but Max directs his vehicle to the other side of the battlefield. Gaius blindly obeys him, influenced by the radiation, and pulls their unconscious friends out, which the captain witnesses. Gaius offers his body as a shield when the captain prepares to execute Max for desertion, but the wounded Max gathers his last strength and kills the commander. Max mourns his friend, but, upon hearing Rada's name from the now conscious Fank, agrees to cooperate with the Wanderer. After the battle ends, Max buries Gaius while listening to Fank's proposals. He will have an apartment on the Institute's premises, his car, and freedom of movement. But he will only see Rada once he proves his loyalty to the state. Meanwhile, the prosecutor heads to the Wanderer's department where he deceitfully meets with Max. He proposes that Max overthrow the unknown fathers by providing the coordinates of the center that controls the tower system. Upon infiltrating the center, Max must activate special radiation, causing waves of depression, which will subdue all the people in the country, including the military. Then, Max must eliminate the unknown fathers. Afterward, he will become the ruler of the state and free Rada, who's in the Wanderer's hands. The prosecutor will serve as his advisor. Max takes Zeph with him and embarks on the mission. He arrives at the center and issues orders to his associates, instructing them to detonate the bomb in the trunk if he does not return. He easily gains access to the interior, but is halted by guards just before reaching the elevator. Max incapacitates them, but the men regain consciousness and pursue him. Max reaches the control center and activates the depression mode throughout the country. The Wanderer watches as people fall to the ground and rushes toward the control center. Meanwhile, Max returns to retrieve the bomb, places it inside the building, and triggers it. Then, he leaves the site of the impending explosion. The Wanderer initiates a pursuit of Max and, catching up with him, engages in a confrontation. At that moment, a powerful explosion resounds, destroying the main transmitter. People on the streets begin to regain their senses and sobriety as Max rushes to find Rada and locates her in a cryo chamber. He carries the girl outside, but the Wanderer blocks his path. It is then revealed that he is, in fact, an employee of Galactic Security from Earth who arrived on the planet 20 years ago to assist it. Now, chaos erupts on the streets, leading to a power struggle in which many people will perish. In his rage, the Wanderer beats up a foolish student who destroyed the fruits of his labor. Forgetting about economics and inflation, the state faces famine and invasion from neighboring countries. Max starts to resist and, in turn, accuses the Wanderer of allowing the construction of the towers and the enslavement of the local population. However, the Wanderer reminds him of the laws of history, where all rational beings go through the experience of wars and enslavement. This planet is no exception. It is at this point that Max declares that he is now home. As long as he is alive, he will fight against inflation, hunger, and wars, and will not allow the establishment of yet another society based on slavery. Rada comes to Max, and as they stand together, the Wanderer smiles.